Okay. We have a new mimer that I sent out yesterday, and it's from Shabbos Parshas Baloischa Yud Aleph Sivan Tavshin Mem Aleph, and it goes back to the nevuah of Zechariah that we have in this week's Haftarah, as well as the Haftarah of Shabbos Parshas Miketz. Usually, Shabbos Chanukah, we usually have this Haftarah as well. It says Re'isi, and I've seen. And then he says over there in the nevuah, I've seen V'hine Menoid Azav Kula Gomer. It is an entirely golden menorah. Shiva Neirasal, and 7 of its lamps are upon it. Gomer Shnayim Zeisim Allah, and there were decorative images, carvings of olives on it. There were 2. Yisrael Medrash is brought down the Medrash. Huva Bil Chut Torah, Parsha saying the Ramaskals have brought down Chut Torah on our Parsha. Feature Yirmiyahu Omer Kesef Nimus Kadol Ham Yisrael. Since Yirmiyahu said that the Jews are considered a despised silver, Yecheskel Shu Kaida Oisam Sigim, and Yecheskel calls them dross, like the that's what's left over from metal when you refine it, when you refine gold and silver and precious metal. The junk that's left over is called sigim. So therefore, the Yidden are called by a very negative type of expression. So in contrast to that, the Medrash says, "Oh, Zechariah, so Zechariah came, but Amar said, Re'isi, and I've seen about the Jewish people, the Hey Menoira Zav Kula, they're entirely a gold menorah. Shel Zahavi Kula, meaning it's the Medrash says, in its entirety, it's totally gold, it's pure gold, it's beautiful, it's great." Horrible because the Torah explained the Medrash that Mashmam Shenevuah Zechariah Koi Gamkin Alzman Da'ach, that from this Medrash seems to indicate that the Nevuah of Zechariah is referring also to the present time. The Loika Pirish the Koi Alzman Da'ach, not like the explanation that he's talking about in the future, that Zechariah sort of saw a vision of what would be in the future. In the future, we would be a beautiful, a pure menorah and so on. But rather, it's the fact that Zechariah said his words in contrast to Yirmiyahu Cheskel. The way the Medrash puts it is he's contrasting. Yirmiyahu Cheskel said this about the Jewish people, but Zechariah said this about the Jewish people. If he's contrasting the two, that tells me that really you're talking about the same time, or else it's not a contrast. Yirmiyahu and Cheskel are talking about when the Yidden were in Golus, or prior to the Golus, when they were going to, because of their Avedis, they were going to go into Golus, and Zechariah is talking about the future time. So it's understood. Moving, it's understood. The Koyal Oisas Man Shaboy Dibru Haim, that it's talking about at the same time that the Zechariah, that Yirmiyahu and Cheskel were talking about. So on this, the Rebbe asks, we need to understand. After Yirmiyahu Yecheskel Sheniba was Manabayis, how is it possible that Yirmiyahu Yecheskel, that they said prophecy during the times of the Beis Hamikdash? So the times of the Beis Hamikdash obviously was a more elevated and more spiritual time. They called the Jewish people silver, they called them dross. Dafka Zechariah Shoya Bisman Golos Bavel Zechariah Navi. He was one of the last Nevi'im. As we know, Chagi Zechariah Malachi are the conclusion of the Nevi'im, the final Nevi'im. He was in the times of Golos Bavel. Amar, he said, they are entirely a golden menorah. So first of all, how can we have this contrast? It makes more sense that during the time of the Beis Hamikdash, Eden would be called gold. Now, during the time of Golus, we're not that great. Dafka Yirmiyahu and Yecheskel called us things that are not so perfect. And Zechariah, that was in the time of Golus, called us gold. Then the Rebbe adds additionally, especially according to what it's known, that both these and those are the words of the living God. This means to say, also the other explanation, that the prophecy of Zechariah goes on the future, is also words of the living God. Not only that, it is also a ruling lahalacha that this is that way. That the la'asid lava you Yisrael menoira zav kula b'tachsa shleimus. That in the future the Eden will be an entirely golden menorah, complete, total perfection. And I'm not sure exactly what he means over here, la'alacha. Does it mean la'alacha that we say Eden will be in the most highest way possible when Mashiach comes? Or is he talking about that la'alacha we will have the menorah will be made out of gold when Mashiach comes, as opposed to if Eden can't afford it, so then in previous times they were not done out of gold? I don't know. So he says, this is understood, the advantage of this idea that they are entirely a golden menorah, despite this great advantage. Zechariah Navi said this specifically in the time of Golus. He called us a menorah of gold. So therefore, we need to, in addition to the contrast that we spoke about before between Yirmiyahu and Yechezkel versus Zechariah, they said it during Golus. They said it during this Zman Beis Hamikdash, and Zechariah said it during the time of Golus. In addition to that, we need to understand what's going on with the nevuah of the two ways of explaining the nevuah. How do you put it together if we're even talking about that Zechariah is talking about the time of Mashiach's times, but when did he say the nevuah? He said the nevuah during a time of Golus. If he said the nevuah during a time of Golus, how could he experience like that type of vision, if you will, that is the perfect vision of Klal Yisrael in the time of Golus? Well, to be able to understand this, we first have to preface the explanation. The matter Bnei Yisrael, menorahs of Kula, the Eden are called an entire golden menorah. It's made entirely out of gold. Saying like it says in our parsha, mixtures of. This is the making of the menorah. It's hammered out gold to its leg and to its blossoms or flowers. It's entirely hammered out. Meaning it's entirely one body, one thing. It's hammered out entirely from its leg to its flower, to its the decorative flower. It's brought down, look at the Torah, that these two things, Yerecha and Pircha, the leg and the flower, these are two extremes, indicating two extreme levels that there is in Klal Yisrael. The leg is referring to the lower levels, that says by them that it's expressions that indicate how low it is. In other words, like the leg and the body in general, Chassidus always talks about the leg being low. Pircha is talking about the blossom, the blooms, the flowers. And Bechinas al Yonis, these are higher levels. Al Derech Yotzitz Parach Yisrael, that similar to what it says, that Yisrael will blossom, Yisrael will sprout forth, Yisrael will bloom like a flower. It says it's a contrast. It says in the Nevuah, Haboim Yashrish Yaakov, that initially those that come into Mitzrayim, they like took root in Mitzrayim. The root shows that they are like in the ground. They are in having to do with the earth. But what results is when the Yid went out of Mitzrayim, Chassidus always explains, the Medrash explains, so then it became a blossom, then it became a bloom, and it went from Yaakov to Yisrael. So we see the idea of a flower, the idea of a bloom, that shows on a uplifted level. So we say that the entire menorah is hammered out from its leg to its blossom to its flower. That means that we're talking about from the lowest level to the highest level, the kula miksha achas, and they are all together one entity that's hammered out. In the service of a person, that's the idea of avos Yisrael. That's the concept that it's miksha achas, that they are made out of one gold piece of gold. In other words, there are no differentiations. It's all the same. And this itself, there's a unique idea. There's a novel explanation over here. Not only is there the leg and there's the blossom, indicating there's the head amongst Klal Yisrael, the foot amongst Klal Yisrael, there's the head amongst Klal Yisrael. And each one of them has an advantage over the other one. The head has the obvious advantage over the foot. But on the other hand, the foot has an advantage that the leg doesn't have, that the head doesn't have. For example, the head, we've brought this mashal in other occasions, when the head wants to go learning in Beis Medrash, when the head wants to go to shul, who brings him there? That's the foot that brings him there. So therefore, there are things that the head needs to come onto the foot. There are concepts, there's ideas that only the foot can do that the head can't do. So in that regard, the foot is greater than and higher than the head. Ella Oiza is in addition to the fact that each one has an advantage over the other. The head has an advantage over the foot, and the foot has an advantage over the head. But rather, Shein Metzias Achas Mamish, that they are entirely one entity, Miksha Achas. They are hammered out. They're one slab of gold, one piece of gold that's hammered out into all these different designs. The Rebbe is going to bring that this is the two different ways of looking at Avos Yisrael and Achdus Yisrael, the way the Alter Rebbe hints at in Tanya. Before Betanya Perek Lamed Beis, like explained in Tanya, the Levad Zois. In addition to the fact that we say that why do we have to love every Yid, even though it seems that some might be lower than me and so on. Who knows their root and their source in the living God? This means that each neshama has its own advantage. That's one point that the Alter Rebbe says over there in Perek Lamed Beis. How can you not appreciate another Yid because he's quote unquote lower than you? You don't know what is lower and what is higher. You think that because he may be a regel and you may be a roish, that because of that you are higher than him. There's an advantage in him that he may have that you don't have. That is the first point that Alter Rebbe says in time. That's not the point of our parsha. The second point the Alter Rebbe says in Perek Lamed Beis, in the Oidzos, the Alter Rebbe adds, Sha'av echad l'kulano. There in Perek Lamed Beis, the Alter Rebbe adds that there's one Father to all of us. What does it mean, one Father, all of us, to all of us? When all the Yid were part of the one Father for all of us, they were there as one entity. They were hammered out as one, meaning all Yidden in our source, the way we are in Mayachav, in Chachmeilah, or even higher. Over there's no distinction. Over there isn't even the distinctions of Regel and Roish. It's not just a matter that the foot may have or does have an advantage over the head. There is no foot, there is no head over there. It's like in the droplet that comes from the Father, that there's still no distinctions that this part of the droplet is a head and this part of the droplet is a foot. It's all one. The same thing, all Klal Yisrael were all one and not distinct whatsoever. That is the message of the term in our parsha used, that it's Miksha Achas. By saying Miksha Achas, that it's hammered out as one piece of gold, it is indicating this unity, that despite the fact that we see externally that this is the leg of the menorah and this is the flower of the menorah, despite those distinctions, really they are entirely one entity. Essentially, they are really one. The ultimate unity that he talks about in Perek Lamed Beis. Okay, any questions before we go on? Fine. We're holding on the bottom two lines of the first page of your printouts. Action is the primary thing. This one understood also concerning this menorah, that is the whole Klal Yisrael. The main thing about the menorah is not just saying, "Oh, it's so wonderful. We are all gold. We are all lovely and wonderful and fantastic." No, the main thing is the action that is performed with this golden menorah. The menorah taught you that the menorah should illuminate and shine. How is that done? That's through the 7 lamps that are in the menorah. The idea behind this is because the Torah Reish Parsha say no, like it's explained the Torah at the beginning of our Parsha. Zayin Hanedes, Haim Zayin Sugim B'Bnei Yisrael, that the 7 lamps and the 7 branches of the menorah are the 7 different types of Klal Yisrael. That there's different types and different levels. This one serves with Avad, this one serves with Yira, and so on, Chesed, Gvura, and so on. In a Tachlis Bris Adam Yavidas Lekaine, the goal and the purpose of the creation of a person is his service to his maker. Kemaimer, like it says in the Lashon Anila in the Bresi Ela L'Sham Sheskaini, I was only created to serve my maker, so that is the goal of the creation. Therefore, when we talk about 7 types of Yidden, what is the purpose of having 7 types of Yidden? Because the purpose is the avodah they bring. Every single Yid has a different type of avodah. Avodas Hashem Yesh Zayin Madregisher Keneged Zayin Amidus in the service of the Eibusher. There are 7 levels that correspond. There are 7 attributes that there is in the person. At length, in that Maimer, the Mittler Rebbe, the main avodah that we're doing these days is to refine our attributes, the emotional attributes, the 7 mitzvahs. Refining the intellect and the brain part of our neshama, that will be in the future when Mashiach comes. This is the reason why that it says that there were the 3 countries of Moav, Ammon, and Edom, which Yidden did not conquer when they went into Eretz Yisrael. Whereas the 7 nations, they did conquer. Why did they have to conquer the 7 nations? Because this was a forerunner of what we are supposed to do with our internal avodah. And our internal avodah, we're supposed to conquer, and it's upon us the obligation to go ahead and bring about the transformation of the 7 midos. Therefore, we were given the 7 nations. But the 3 nations of Ammon, Moav, and Edom, or otherwise known as the nations of Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoni, these nations will only be when Mashiach comes, as it says, Ki Yarchev Hashem Elokechas Vulcha. When it says concerning Arei Miklat, it says that Hashem will broaden your boundaries. What type of broadening of boundaries? It's talking about the additional 3 lands, that the 3 lands corresponds to the 3 levels of intellect. But the main point is that is for the future time. Now we have to work on the 7 emotions. That's the idea of the 7 branches of the menorah. These are 7 types of service of the Eibusher. Connect them and corresponding to these 7 types of service of the Eibusher. Yesh Zayin Sugim B'Nei Yisrael. There's 7 types of Yidden Shem Keneged Zayin Amidus that they correspond to the 7 emotional attributes. So the Rebbe goes on to say, on the second paragraph on this page, every service down here below needs an assistance of the Eibusher from above. Like the statement is, the Rebbe like excerpts part of a statement that says, if not for Hashem assisting him, a Yid would not be able to overcome and deal with the Yetzer Hara. So, but the main thing is that we find that every avodah that a person does down here, we need to have the assistance of Hashem. This is what explains the Torah. In this Maimer of Varisi's of Menoras of, they explains at the beginning, Shivas Hanedes, that the 7 candles are the neshamas of the 7 shepherds. There's in Klal Yisrael throughout history 7 people that were considered shepherds of Klal Yisrael, that they sustained and led Klal Yisrael, like Moshe Rabbeinu, like David HaMelech, and so on. So they are shepherds that are also have to do with the 7 candles, because they, as we're going to explain, light the 7 candles. So on the one hand, we talk about the 7 branches of the menorah that has to do with the 7 types of Yid. That's all fine and good. But these 7 types of Yidden need to be kindled as well. Yanishal Roya, who the idea of a shepherd is Shu Roya Mefarnes Sapik Kol Tzarchitzain Marisai, that he is the one that takes out the pasture to graze, and he sustains and supplies all the needs of his flock of sheep. So just like a physical shepherd does that, similar to us, this understood concerning the 7 shepherds of the neshamas of Yidden, and the kroim b'shem tzoyin. The neshamas of Yidden are called sheep, and the sheep need a shepherd. Which of course, I will place my sheep, the sheep of my grazing, of my taking out the pasture, the roya. These are the ones that give an assistance to the neshamas of Yidden. The Inyan Zeh who gamas mana goals. This is to be found also in the time of goals. That's not just, let's say, the times of the Beis Hamikdash or in the times of the Midbar. Then you had the 7 shepherds. You had the idea of a shepherd, that's someone that used to help out and give assistance to the Yidden and so on. But rather also in the time of goals. So the Rebbe is going to bring an example or a proof. How do we see that it's even in the time of goals? Says, move a mama vor betanya and Gela Moshe Rabbeinu, like it's understood from what's explained in Tanya concerning Moshe Rabbeinu. Who are Rishon Meshiva Sarai, and he's the first of the 7 shepherds. That over there, the Alter Rebbe asks the famous question: how could it be that Moshe Rabbeinu says, Ma Hashem Elokecha shoyel me'imach kiyum liyira oisei? The Gemara asks, how could that be that the Moshe Rabbeinu said in Chumash Devarim, what does Hashem ask from you? All he asks from you is to fear. What's it mean? All he asks from you is to fear. How could that be? Is it then a minor thing? Is Yira Milsa Zutrasi? The Gemara asks. So the Gemara answers. She says that the Alter Rebbe brings it down in Perek Mem Beis and Tanya all that in Legabe Moshe Milsa Zutrasi, that in regards to Moshe Rabbeinu, having fear and awe of Hashem is a minor thing. If so, the Alter Rebbe asks, what does it help us? Moshe Rabbeinu, it's a minor thing. What does it help by me? But because by Moshe Rabbeinu, it's a minor thing, and since he is someone that always mashpia this in us, and there's a Moshe within us always, so therefore it's minor for us as well. So the Rebbe is going to bring from that explanation of Perek Mem Beis that with this we could see how Moshe Rabbeinu being a leader is something that's ongoing now. Moshe Rabbeinu being a shepherd is an ongoing thing now. And from this, all the Rebbe will extrapolate concerning all the shepherds. So let's see, 4 lines from the end of this paragraph. Since in regards and in comparison to Moshe Rabbeinu, awe and fear of Hashem is considered a minor matter. Therefore, it's a minor matter for every single Yid. The feature who mamshech inyan zeh tamid min neshamas Yisrael, because he draws this matter down constantly in the shamas of Yid. Also in the double and quadruple darkness in the time of Golus. From Moshe Rabbeinu will be understood in regards to all the other shepherds. And also all the rest of the shepherds of Klal Yisrael bring down to all the Yidden in the Avodas Hashem. And they feed them and they sustain them throughout the time of Golus as well. So now we're going to go back to the idea that the Yidden are called a lamp, the natives. By the way, I'm using specifically the term lamp because he's going to talk about all the different pieces that make up a lamp, and that's very crucial to be able to understand it. If I were to say the word candle, when we use the word candle, we think about like a wax candle. We don't get the full picture of what we're talking about over here. So I'm specifically using over here the word lamp. When the Neshamas Yisrael are now called here as natives in the Menorah, while Shem HaKosov is because what it says in the pasuk Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam, that the neshama of a person is the lamp of Hashem. But Inyan who the idea behind this is that the neshama of a person is called a lamp of Hashem, and again, the lamp that we're using over here is going to be in the the original usage of the word lamp. In the four book of the Torah, let's explain what the Torah about Chanukah, and at length in the Amorim of Chanukah of Torah, which also speaks about the menorah. Shari Yoda is the Sefer, the Mittler Rebbe, that talks about Chanukah and Purim. Torah and the Amorim of Tzedek, with the Rosh Shalachas and the Amorim following. So they all explain why is a person's neshama like a lamp. That the lamp has the three things. What is the lamp itself? The lamp itself in the olden days was that metal or earthenware container, shuakli, the earthenware container that holds in it the rest of the things necessary for holding for illumination. And Vashemen, and then there's the oil. That's the second thing. Vapsila, and there's the wick. This is why Neshamas Yisrael are called lamps. Al Shlem Kli Haneir, because of the vessel of the lamp. It's a receptacle to be able to receive in it the oil and the wick. The oil and the wick are the Torah mitzvahs. They are also called a lamp. In other words, it's not just in the first explanation of lamp. Lamp goes just on that physical vessel, on that metal or earthenware container. But in a more general fashion, the entire makeup of the illumination and so on is also called a ner, which costs, like it says, kiner mitzvah Torah, that the mitzvah is like a lamp, and the Torah is the fire and the light that's on top of it. So therefore, in this regard, since we say the Shemin and the Psila is the Torah mitzvah, so therefore we find that the entire thing is called ner, like it says ner mitzvah. Through Yidden fulfilling Torah mitzvahs, through that they are candles to illuminate the entire world. The Isa like it's brought down concerning on the menorah that was in the Beis Hamikdash, that from the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, light went out to the entire world. Famous Maimer Chazal that says V'chi la'oira hu tzarich. The Medrash speaks about, the Eibishter says that is it then necessary for the Eibishter to have light? Is the reason why the Eibishter commanded Aaron HaKoyin to kindle the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash? Is it because Hashem Kaviyachol needs our light to illuminate for us? The Eibishter, there's no darkness, etc., etc. So what is the idea of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash? It's not about supplying light to the Beis Hamikdash, but rather it's about bringing light and illumination outward, outside of the Beis Hamikdash. And we see this from the actual building, the physical building of the Beis Hamikdash, that the windows of the Beis Hamikdash were designed, that the aperture of the windows was narrow on the inside and wide on the outside part of the wall of the Beis Hamikdash. Normally, in the windows in those days, it was narrow on the outside, and then it was wide and broad on the inside, because the purpose of the windows was to bring the light from the outside into the room. So there was a small aperture, so as protection, so other things that you don't want to come in shouldn't come in. They're like broadened into the room to bring and spread that light into the room. The design of the windows in the Beis Hamikdash was the other way. The aperture end that was in the room was narrow, and the wide side was outward, indicating that the purpose of the Beis Hamikdash was not to bring light in, but the purpose of the Beis Hamikdash was to bring light out. And that was the function of the menorah, and so to the Yidden that are called a ner of the menorah, and they are doing so through the Torah mitzvahs, that when Yidden are this lamp that they have in the fulfill the Torah mitzvahs, ner Hashem nishmas adam, they are the function of the menorah. They are doing what the menorah is meant to do, which is to extend and bring outward the revelation of godliness to the world. Any questions? Okay, we'll stop over here.